See what a full-on week it has been. I know if it's the same for you, then you can appreciate that it's Friday and we're really looking forward to the long weekend ahead. Now, just on the quiet side, there have been a couple of announcements from the ASD Australian Signals Directorate that I will add to the links in the comments below around being careful about online web applications and making sure you're securing yourself against them. So please keep in mind, think before you click, as I like to say. Now, you have sent so many questions around ChatGPT. It is a topic that I've heard 1,000 times over, and I'm sure you all have as well. So why don't I bring in an expert to talk about what are the do's, don'ts, and how you should be really careful about using ChatGPT. So allow me to join Leanne to the session. Hey, Leanne, how are you today?
Hey, Kristof, going well, thank you.
All right, so really topical point of conversation. ChatGPT. I've seen you in the newspaper. I've seen your articles. I know you do a lot around this. It has really started to get so much traction in the fact that people consider ChatGPT as the only AI tool online, which, as we're well aware, it is probably not even close to being one of the forerunners. So, friend or foe? Let's start with that. ChatGPT.
Your friend or foe? So I say it's a great tool to use, but it still requires so much human input. And one of my little pet hates is people like just relying on whatever data, whatever content it spits out, but it ultimately still relies on the humans to feed it. Otherwise it's garbage in, garbage out. And it's one of my little pet hates. People going, oh, look, it's a great time-saving thing. I just plug in one thing and look, this is great. Halfway decent, let's just post it and not think about the repercussions.
Yeah, interesting topic about that. I mean, we've seen lawyers over in the US use ChatGPT get caught out. It's not always factual. The other thing about ChatGPT is that it can quite often give you non-factual information, which you do need to validate. And the one that we're familiar with is ChatGPT 3. The one that is publicly available is the legacy one that got terminated as in data ingestion in 2019. So another thing to keep in mind, it's definitely a foe in regards to that, right? Because it doesn't have modern data. So how are you finding your way around ChatGPT as, let's say, a no-no? What are the things that you would like to tell people not to do?
Don't just put in one prompt and accept the first draft as gospel. What I've actually started telling my clients, because yes, it's only got data up until September 2021, right? And you don't know what that data is. You don't know the sources, and you can ask it for sources, but it'll just give you dummy links. It won't actually be able to tell you if it does actually tell you. So what I've actually been telling my clients is use your old school strategy of doing research like you would if you were writing, any type of content. You do research, find sources you can rely upon, and then you can actually copy and paste that content into ChatGPT and ask it to do a summary for you, ask it to write the content, use only that content, and then create your blog articles or whatever else. And then you know where it's actually come from. Then you can use those hyperlinks and just show that it's reliable content. And it actually does quite a good job. I mean, you do have to say things like, please, rewrite in my tone of voice and do not plagiarize, because otherwise it may actually take chunks of text, which I've noticed. But that way you actually know what it's using. Otherwise you have no idea, and this is where legal issues could potentially come up if it's taking from unreliable sources.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept where you are let's call it, you are the input creator, and the questions you ask are garnering output, right? So AI in its factual point is the ability to think beyond it. So ChatGPT still requires a lot more machine learning, which means it's looking at historical patterns and pathways and actually responding to questions. So it's a great point to do. So one, do not expect that the information you put in out of first roll will be 100% correct. Number two, make sure you fact check everything. What's another no-no? Let's just say when we're talking about entering information that may be, let's call it private.
I would avoid putting any private information in. We are all beta testers right now. That's why it's free. There's a free version. So we have no idea how this information is going to be used. So I would definitely be careful about like putting in private. I mean, I'll just, your email address, which can be found on the website, no worries. But maybe more wary about putting your phone numbers, your date of birth, credit card details. Don't think you would anyway, but anything like that, we just don't know how this data is going to be used, because it's all probably going to be assessed, our patterns of using the tool, and that will affect the future of it. So definitely be wary of that.
Yeah, any IP or company-based IP, please do not put that into ChatGPT. We've seen the public announcement around Samsung's code being released. ChatGPT has been breached a number of times, just so people are aware. In fact, usernames and passwords have appeared on the dark web on several occasions due to the fact that leaks have occurred on the ChatGPT platform. Now, you made a very valid point. The one that we get for free is used to refine ChatGPT 4. Now, ChatGPT 4 is available. You can actually commercially consume and purchase access to this. Not only in a public version, which means that you have access to other people's data, which can be, again, ingested from the internet, but also in a private mode. So there is options for people to actually invest and use ChatGPT to bolt into, for example, their platforms. Now, we've seen a lot of this through products like Microsoft Bing being utilized, for example, and we're seeing this coded into a lot of chatbots. So what are the key factors here? We're talking about let's call it a 7-year-old mind working behind these, that people need to be mindful when they're integrating ChatGPT, Leanne.
All the things to think about. I think, yeah, so it's definitely, as I said before, it is definitely a tool that it's still evolving. It still has limitations. It's still, like, for example, it hasn't quite evolved to the point where, as an Australian, it can't do Australian spelling. So it has all Americanized spelling. It still has things like repetition going on. So if you ask for it to give you 300 words and it only can find 100, it'll just rehash the same thing. So it isn't capable of writing a fully fledged 1,000 word article with what it can access. And so there's also things like dealing with any sensitive issues as well. You know, be very mindful of all of that, because if you know your industry, I think it comes down to that as well. Like, you know your industry, you don't undervalue your experience and go, oh, ChatGPT, hey, you can access way more data than probably I know. I think it's really just, and this is why I'm saying to everyone, like, use it as a starting point. If you're looking at that white screen of death and you have no idea how to start, definitely use it. But don't just rely on it when you already know a lot. You already know your industry, you know what you're talking about. And I think as well, all the content it does spit out, it's very surface level. It doesn't have the human, it doesn't have depth to it. It doesn't have the stories. It's not a mind reading tool. I can't say, what you've experienced. So definitely have that as a first little draft, and then you go back and add your own perspectives, your own research, your own data, and that will be a lot more worthwhile. Because otherwise, we're all going to become very savvy to what I'm already becoming savvy to ChatGPT content. I can read it and go, yeah, that's generic ChatGPT content. Like, I can pick it. So if you're not doing things like inserting your tone of voice in the prompt and knowing your audience and putting that into the prompt, it's all going to sound very generic. And so your reputation is going to be affected. So yeah, so much to think about.
Oh, look, that's okay. Look, there is some seriously key uses for it, right? Now, as an engineer, we understand, you can ask code, for example, how do you shut down a port on a Juniper SRX? That code can be prompted and it's really great and it's handy. From a technology perspective, it can be quite useful. I understand from what you're talking about, from a human perspective, it's also very much limited. It also comes with a lot of biases, unfortunately, due to the fact that it has ingested data previously from multiple entry points, and therefore along the way, as it has been trained, and to your point, right, you made that point, it is being trained and it is being watched. So a lot of those biases are underbellied by questions that other people are asking, which means it's adapting to that. So it's constantly an adapting beast. And I think one of the key factors that we really just sort of want to be mindful of, especially around this, is when we're using the tools like the ChatGPT or other alternatives, it's all based around expanding the volume of questions and the tone that you can use. As an example, if you're talking about AI for tooling on graphics or creating imaging, or then going and using it, for example, in your case, you could use that so that you could do obviously words and demonstrating. Look, a paragraph or two. I wouldn't use it for documents, especially not. And if you are creating websites, it can be quite handy to be able to repurpose, as you said, certain words. But that's one of the things. And let's take it down to another dark level here. We're talking about security. And we've mentioned, obviously don't put IP in, don't put your personal information, etc. What are the other secure bits and pieces as a no-no that you would suggest people keep in mind when using products, especially like ChatGPT?
Well, like the whole plagiarism thing as well. I mean, I think, yeah, there's been some legal issues come up, and I read these articles, and people just say, "Oh, but ChatGPT said it," and I think you need to still have responsibility if you are putting out ChatGPT content without doing a due diligence and checking everything and all of that. Because hey, it's a great time-saving thing, and I'm a busy person. You're gonna just have to be aware of the risks, right? So that's where I just look, at one point in the future it could be a lot stronger, and it can tell you here the sources, because at the moment it can't access real-time data. So eventually, when it can tell you here the sources and you can check them and know it's all 100%, no worries. But I think at the moment, just remember that ChatGPT is all rehashed content. There's no original thought in there. So it's come from somewhere. You are just trusting a tool that it hasn't plagiarized. But how do you actually know? How you could put into plagiarism checkers and it'll say, oh yeah, it's enough words have been changed that it's not plagiarized, but it has come from somewhere. And I think that's the most important fact. I think what I've been saying to my clients, for example, is if you are creating website content, what you can even do is record yourself on Zoom or similar, saying what you want to say. Because I know there's often a mental block. As a copywriter, I know there's often a mental block between what you're thinking and trying to type it out. So say it, verbalize it, get a transcript, and then upload the transcript into ChatGPT and ask it to use your transcript to write the content with headings, subheadings, using this keyword, using exact phrases. Then it is your original thought. It's all your stuff. Sure, I mean, look, what's original thought? I know you may have accrued it from other sources, but ultimately, it's you. I've done this actually for some of my clients, and it's been it's sped up my process from, all right, let's go through a transcript. In seconds, it's done it for me. And then I spend half the time or a quarter of the time revisiting it. So I think that's a big factor. You just don't know. You're relying on the content to be safe to use, and you just don't know for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Hi, Rena. Thank you for commenting on the post. It's great to see you around. One of the key factors you've mentioned about this, and this is something that's also being used heavily, is plagiarism in education. Now, one of the key tools, it's called ChatZero, and that is definitely a platform that is able to detect ChatGPT in assignments and in education. So it's a tool that's been designed for education facilitators to be able to understand where content potentially has come from ChatGPT. So please keep that in mind, education facilitators. All right, great. Thank you so much for answering these questions, Leanne. Now, I know that there are probably some burning hot top tips that you want to leave with the audience, especially around this sort of content. What are they?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on it before, but definitely you want the content to be consistent with your brand. It's otherwise going to come out very generic. So have a bit of time to think about what your tone of voice is. So, is it professional, conversational, informal? All these different terms. You can kind of look up a whole bunch and experiment. But putting that into your prompt and then knowing who you're speaking to, the audience, their pain points, plugging that in. And also about the whole outcome. Is it meant to be persuasive, just informative, entertaining? If you put that in and then write a 800-word, 1,000-word blog, the quality is going to be so much better than if you just say, write a blog for me on this topic. It's going to be a lot more personalized, and it's going to come across as more trustworthy content if it reflects you. So if they people meet you in real life, if your content does not reflect how you actually speak, there's going to be that disconnect. So I think 100% make sure, like, spend that time finding out what that tone of voice is, knowing your audience, plug that in every time you do a prompt, and then the content will be a lot closer to the mark. It'll mean minimal editing, and it also means that your brand consistency is maintained, and that trust there with the brand is maintained.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your insights on this, Leanne. If you want to reach out to Leanne, she will be linked in the comments above and in the title, so feel free to do so. As always, please feel free to send through your questions for the coming weeks. I know that there is a lot of you that have asked around to ChatGPT. Give me a bit of insights, and I really appreciate it, Leanne. We have a lot of questions around marketing as well, around digital marketing, how to utilize that. So I will be answering some of those with someone who is specializing in that in the coming weeks. So thank you for reaching out. Now, as I like to say, please be careful. Think before you click. There is a lot of activity in spam, especially around the ATO and tax time. So please, extremely careful when you are thinking about clicking on anything. Right now, the ATO is definitely not sending out any notifications, just to keep that in mind. So until next week, thanks, Leanne, for joining me. I really appreciate it. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you. You too. See ya.
And I will see everyone, as always, next Friday